For centuries, there's one weapon that has captured our imaginations like nothing else. It's so much more than just a blade. It's a masterpiece, a symbol of honor, and really, an icon of Japanese history. We are, of course, talking about the katana.
But that gets you thinking, right? How on earth does a tool, something designed specifically for combat, transform into a cultural treasure? Something that's admired for its beauty just as much as its deadly purpose.
Well, for the samurai, the answer wasn't something they just found on the battlefield. No, it was literally forged in the incredible heat of a smith's fire, where raw metallurgy and pure artistry just became the same thing. Okay, let's get into it. So first up, we're going to look at the very heart of the katana's legend, this almost magical process of how it's made. And I'm telling you, this is not just bending metal, it's an incredibly high-stakes craft that was perfected over generations. The real secret sauce is a technique called differential hardening. First, the smith carefully coats the blade in a special clay mixture. It's thick along the spine, the back of the sword, but super thin right along the cutting edge. Then it gets heated to a really precise temperature. We're talking over 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. And now for the moment of truth. The blade is plunged into water. This is called quenching. Because the clay is thin on the edge, it cools down instantly, becoming incredibly hard. But the spine, with its thick clay coat, cools much slower, staying softer and more flexible. A final tempering step gets rid of any stress in the metal, and what you're left with is a blade that's both razor-sharp and amazingly resistant to shattering. And the result of all this is, well, it's just beautiful. That wavy, almost ghostly line you see on a real katana, that's called the hamon. And get this, it's not etched on, it's not painted on, it's the actual physical line where the crystal structure of the steel changes. It's like the smith's signature, a fingerprint left by fire and water. Now this number is wild. This is the success rate of that quenching process for a master swordsmith. That means, even for the absolute best in the world, up to 30% of blades just fail. A tiny crack, a little warp, or a sharp ping sound, and months of hard work are gone in an instant. The stakes could not be higher. So once this near-perfect blade is finally made, its journey is really just beginning. Now we get to see how this piece of steel becomes something so much more than a weapon, how it becomes the very soul of the warrior who carries it. You see, a katana is not just the blade. The entire package, everything together, is called the kushirai, and it was its own work of art. The hilt, the tsuka, the scabbard, the saya, all those intricate little metal fittings, they were all custom-made. They reflected the status, the personal taste, and even the wealth of the samurai who owned it. This quote right here just nails it. Katanas were the ultimate status symbol. They were given out as rewards for valor, they were exchanged between feudal lords as a sign of respect, and they were passed down through families as priceless heirlooms, carrying the honor of generations. And because they were so important, the most famous swords started to take on their own identities. They were given names. They literally became characters in the grand story of Japan, forever linked to the legendary warriors who wielded them. Let's start with a blade that was owned by one of the most powerful and, frankly, most ruthless warlords in Japanese history, a guy named Oda Nobunaga. His sword was known as Heshikiri Hasebe, which means the press-cut sword. The story goes that Nobunaga cornered a servant who had disrespected him, and the guy tried to hide under a big wooden shelf. Now, instead of taking a full swing, Nobunaga just pressed the blade down. The sword was so unbelievably sharp that it sliced right through the thick wood of the shelf and the man hiding underneath. It's a pretty chilling story, but it perfectly captures the merciless nature of its owner.
All right, next up, we have a sword with a name that sounds like it was pulled straight out of a fantasy novel. Raikiri, the Thunder Cutter. This one belonged to the warlord Tachibana Dosetsu. So as the legend has it, Dosetsu was chilling under a tree during a thunderstorm when a bolt of lightning struck right above him. And what must have been an impossibly fast reflex, he drew his sword and actually cut the bolt of lightning in two, saving his own life. The story says the strike left him partially paralyzed, but he still led his troops into battle from a palanquin, which earned him the nickname Thunder God. Just incredible.
From those legendary battlefields of the past, the katana has made a really surprising journey into our modern world, where its status, well, it's changed completely once again.
And this leads to a question I bet a lot of you are wondering, especially if you're into martial arts or collecting. With all this incredible history, can you just, go to Japan and buy a real katana? Well, the answer is a lot more complicated than you might think.
Here's the deal. Japan's modern sword law, the Jutoho, is incredibly strict.
As you can see from this table, owning most foreign-made blades or double-edged blades is just flat-out illegal. The only exception is for traditionally made Japanese swords, and even then, they have to be registered with the government, not as weapons, but as works of art and cultural assets.
And that right there brings our entire story full circle. The transformation is totally complete. The laws of the nation now legally define the katana not by its ability to fight, but by its artistic and historical value. It is officially moved from the battlefield to the museum.
So we're left with one final thought to chew on. After all these centuries of history, myth, and incredible craftsmanship, what is the true legacy of the katana? Is it the unmatched sharpness of that steel edge, or is it the weight of all the stories, the legends, and the very souls it has carried through time?